You are standing in the desert heat, mouth sticky with dust, watching arrows fall from the sky like rain. Your shield already has 11 shafts buried in it. The weight makes your arm shake. You've been standing here for 3 hours and the enemy hasn't charged once. They just circle and shoot and circle. And the man next to you is crying because he knows what you know. There's nowhere to run. The horizon is flat in every direction, and the Parthians own all of it. If that hooked you, consider subscribing. This channel exists for people who want history that doesn't waste their time. This is the story of Carrhae, or one of Rome's wealthiest men led 7 legions into the Mesopotamian desert and destroyed them in an afternoon. Not through superior numbers, not through better armor or tactics Rome understood, through something the legions had never encountered, an enemy that refused to fight the way wars were supposed to be fought. The year is 53 BCE. The Roman Republic is splitting at the seams between 3 men, Julius Caesar in Gaul, Pompey in Rome, and Marcus Licinius Crassus in Syria. Crassus is the richest man in the Mediterranean world. He owns most of Rome's real estate, controls the fire brigades, and finances half the Senate. But wealth doesn't translate to military glory, and Crassus has watched Caesar conquer Gaul while Pompey built his legend, crushing pirates. Crassus has money. He wants immortality. The Parthian Empire sits across Rome's eastern frontier, a sprawling territory that stretches from the Euphrates to India. They've done nothing to Rome. No raids, no provocations. The peace is stable. But Crassus doesn't need a reason. He needs a triumph. He needs to march into the Senate with gold from Parthian temples and prisoners in chains. So he invents a pretext and marches east with 7 legions, 42,000 heavy infantry, 4,000 light infantry, and 4,000 cavalry, 50,000 men. That's more soldiers than the population of most ancient cities. It's a column that takes hours to pass a single point on the road. It's the largest Roman force assembled in a decade. On paper, it should be unstoppable. Rome has conquered the Mediterranean by perfecting a simple formula: heavy infantry in tight formation, shields locked, advancing in disciplined lines that grind through anything in their path. The legion is a machine. It's turned Spain, Greece, and North Africa into provinces. Crassus assumes Parthia will be next. But the legions are built for terrain that rewards discipline. Forests, hills, river valleys where the enemy has to meet you face to face. Mesopotamia is different. It's flat, relentlessly flat. And in that flatness, something else lives. The Parthians don't fight like Romans. They don't believe in heavy infantry charges or pitched battles where men die in formation. They've spent centuries perfecting a different kind of warfare, mounted archery at full gallop. Their army is built around 2 kinds of cavalry. The first is the cataphracт-heavy shock cavalry wearing scale armor that covers both rider and horse. They're living battering rams, but they're expensive and few in number. The second type is far more dangerous. Light horse archers who carry composite bows capable of punching through Roman shields at 200 meters. These archers don't wear much armor. They don't need to. Their entire tactical philosophy is built on a simple principle: never stop moving, never get close, never fight on the enemy's terms. They're trained from childhood to shoot backward at full gallop, a technique so difficult it takes years to master. The Romans have faced archers before, but never ones that refuse to run out of arrows. Never ones that turn retreat into weapon. Crassus doesn't understand what he's marching into. He's 60 years old, politically brilliant, tactically mediocre. His subordinate officers warn him to stay near the Euphrates, to keep the river on his flank for water and supply lines. But Crassus is impatient. The Parthian general, Sharena, sends word that he's withdrawing, that Crassus should pursue into the open desert if he wants battle. It's bait. Crassus takes it. He marches his army away from the river into the flat emptiness between the Euphrates and the Balik River. It's June. The heat is monstrous. The soldiers march in formation carrying 60 pounds of equipment each: shield, sword, pilum, armor, supplies. They're designed to fight for an hour, not walk for weeks in 110-degree heat. The desert doesn't care about discipline. It just extracts water. On June 9th, 53 BCE, near the town of Carrhae, Roman scouts report movement on the horizon. Crassus orders the legions into battle formation. This is what they train for. 42,000 heavy infantry form a massive square, shields out, ready to advance. The cavalry spreads thin on the flanks. Everyone expects the Parthians to charge. That's how cavalry works. You charge, you break the line, you win or you die trying. The Parthians don't charge. They form a wide arc around the Roman position, just out of pilum range, and they start riding in a slow circle. The Romans wait for the rush. Instead, they hear drums. The Parthians have tied drums to their saddles' deep, resonant war drums that boom across the empty plain. It's psychological warfare. The sound is everywhere and nowhere. Then the drums stop, and the arrows begin. 10,000 horse archers, circling at a canter, each one loosing arrows every few seconds. The Romans raise shields and lock formation. This is fine. Arrows run out. You endure the volley. Then you advance and crush them in close combat. That's how this works. Except the arrows don't stop. They keep coming. And the Parthians stay just out of reach, circling, shooting. The Romans don't understand what they're seeing yet. Armies carry the arrows they bring to battle. You shoot your quiver, maybe 2 quivers, then you're done. But behind the Parthian cavalry line, a train of camels carries tens of thousands of arrows in packed bundles. When an archer empties his quiver, he rides back, grabs a new bundle, and returns to the circle. It's a logistical system. It's archery as endurance sport. The legionaries crouch behind shields. They can't advance. The moment they break formation to charge, the Parthians wheel away and shoot them from behind. They can't retreat. That just exposes their backs. They can't stay still. The arrows keep coming. The math is brutal. 10,000 archers shooting 6 arrows per minute is 60,000 arrows every 60 seconds. Not all of them hit, not all that hit penetrate, but enough do. Imagine standing there. Imagine the sound, a constant hissing whistle. Overhead, the crack of shafts hitting shields, the screaming from the ranks behind you when arrows punch through gaps in the formation. Your shield gets heavier every minute as more arrows bury themselves in the wood. Your arm is shaking. You can't see the enemy clearly through the dust and heat shimmer. You just hear hooves and drums and that endless industrial whistle of incoming arrows. Crassus sends his son Publius Crassus with 1,300 Gallic cavalry to break the circle. Publius is young, capable, and desperate to prove himself. He leads a direct charge at the Parthian line. The horse archers scatter, retreating exactly as they're trained to do. Publius pursues. It looks like success. It's a trap. The Parthians lead Publius and his cavalry away from the main Roman force, stretching the pursuit over a mile. Once he's isolated, the cataphracts appear, the heavy cavalry Rome didn't know was there. They're massive, men and horses both covered in overlapping scales of bronze and iron. They don't shoot arrows. They carry 12-foot lances and they charge in a wedge formation that hits like a bronze avalanche. Publius's Gallic cavalry try to fight. They're good, some of the best horsemen in Europe, but they're exhausted, outnumbered, and surrounded. The cataphracts punch through them in a single pass, then wheel around for another charge. The Gauls break. Publius and 500 men dismount and form a shield wall on a small rise. The Parthians don't bother fighting them directly, they just surround the hill and resume shooting. Publius's men die in waves. The survivors beg him to try breaking out while a few of them remain. Publius refuses to abandon anyone. When the arrows finally stop, only Publius and a handful of officers are left standing. He orders one of his men to kill him rather than let the Parthians capture him alive. The soldier does. The Parthians take his head. Back at the main Roman position, Crassus doesn't know his son is dead yet. He's trying to hold a formation that's slowly collapsing under the weight of arrows. Legionaries are packed so tightly they can't move without stepping on the wounded. The heat is unbearable. Men are dying of thirst as much as arrow wounds. Some soldiers try to charge, they die in the open, some try to retreat, the Parthians chase them down. Then, the Parthian cavalry returns from killing Publius, and they're carrying his head on a spear. They ride close to the Roman lines, holding it high, shouting Publius's name. Crassus sees his son's head from 100 meters away. The soldiers see it too. The entire Roman formation watches. There's a sound that runs through the ranks. Not quite a scream, not quite a moan. It's the noise men make when they realize they're already dead. Crassus tries to rally them. He's crying, openly crying in front of 40,000 men. The officers try to restore order, but the legionaries aren't stupid. They know what this means. If the cavalry couldn't break through, if Publius died in the open desert, then there's no way out. The afternoon sun is directly overhead now. There's no shade, there's barely any water left. The wounded are begging to be killed because the thirst is worse than the arrows. Some men break formation and run. The Parthians ride them down in seconds. Crassus finally orders a retreat. The legions pull back toward Carrhae, the nearest town, trying to maintain formation while the Parthians circle and shoot. It's not a battle anymore. It's a hunting expedition. The Romans who keep formation survive longer. The ones who panic and run die in the open, arrows in their backs. Nightfall saves the survivors. The Parthians break off, but they're not equipped for night fighting, and they've already won. Of the 50,000 Romans who marched into the desert that morning, 20,000 are dead. Another 10,000 are captured. Crassus and the remaining 20,000 hole up in Carrhae, surrounded, dying of thirst. The Parthians send a message. Sirena wants to negotiate. Crassus knows it's a trap, but his men are mutinous and dying. He agrees to meet. During the parley, a scuffle breaks out. Historical sources disagree on who started it, and Crassus is killed in the chaos. The Parthians pour molten gold into his mouth after he's dead, a symbolic gesture mocking his legendary greed. The survivors surrender. The Parthians march 10,000 Roman prisoners east to the border of their empire and settle them in a military colony near modern Afghanistan. These soldiers will never see Italy again. Their children will grow up speaking Parthian. Some historians believe that decades later, a few of their descendants ended up in China, serving as mercenaries along the Silk Road. But that's another story. The Parthians lose fewer than 100 men. Let that sit for a moment. 50,000 Romans march into the desert. By the next morning, 30,000 are dead or captured, and the rest are fleeing west in scattered groups. The Parthian casualties are negligible. It's not even close. It's extermination. Rome will spend the next century trying to avenge Carrhae and never fully succeed. The Parthians remain independent until the 220 CE, when they're replaced by the Sassanids, who continue the same cavalry tradition. The Romans never solve the problem. They try everything: heavier armor, more cavalry, different tactics. None of it works consistently. You can't beat an enemy that refuses to stand still. Carrhae breaks Rome's aura of invincibility in the east. For centuries, Rome has built its reputation on the idea that disciplined infantry will always defeat lighter, faster enemies. Carrhae proves that's only true when the terrain allows it. In open ground, against an enemy with enough arrows and enough discipline to never close, the legion is just a target. The defeat also collapses the political alliance holding Rome together. With Crassus dead, the partnership between Caesar and Pompey disintegrates. Within 4 years, they'll go to war with each other, dragging the Republic into civil war. You can trace a direct line from Carrhae to the fall of the Roman Republic. One desert, one afternoon, 50,000 dead. There's a question historians still argue about. Could Crassus have won? Maybe. If he'd stayed near the river, built fortifications, refused to be baited into the open, if he'd brought more cavalry, if he'd understood what he was facing. But the deeper answer is no, because Crassus didn't respect the Parthians. He thought wealth and reputation would translate into military genius. He thought Rome's system, the heavy infantry, the discipline, the grinding advance, was universal. He was wrong. War doesn't care about your previous victories. It doesn't care about your money or your reputation. It cares about terrain, logistics, and whether you understand the enemy's win condition. The Parthians understood theirs: never fight on Rome's terms. Stay mobile, stay patient. Let the desert do half the work. They didn't need to kill every Roman in a dramatic charge. They just needed to shoot until the Romans couldn't stand anymore. It's not a glorious strategy, but it worked. And here's the thing. You Romans knew about the Parthians. They'd heard reports of the horse archers and the cataphracts. Crassus had advisors who'd fought in the east. But knowing something exists and respecting it are different. Crassus marched east, convinced that Roman discipline would overwhelm anything the Parthians could field. He believed his own propaganda. That's the real lesson of Carrhae. Confidence without adaptation is just a slower way to die. The archaeological evidence of Carrhae is thin because the desert doesn't preserve bodies well, and the Parthians stripped the battlefield of anything valuable. But ancient sources describe the aftermath: fields of broken shields, thousands of arrows scattered across miles of sand, and a silence so complete it unnerved the Parthian soldiers who returned to loot the dead. They expected the Romans to regroup, to send another army. Instead, Rome pulled back and spent years rebuilding. Think about what it means to lose 30,000 men in a single day. That's not just soldiers, that's farmers, craftsmen, fathers, brothers. That's entire villages in Italy losing every man of fighting age. That's families waiting for letters that will never arrive. The Roman Senate declares 20 days of mourning, but the real mourning happens in thousands of homes across the Republic, where mothers and wives and children slowly realize that the men they sent to war aren't coming back. And the humiliation is worse than the casualties. Rome has conquered most of the known world by convincing everyone that Roman soldiers don't lose. The legion is supposed to be unstoppable. Carrhae shatters that myth in the most public way possible. It emboldens Rome's enemies. It makes the next 20 years of Roman history more violent, because suddenly everyone thinks Rome can be beaten. There's a detail from the ancient sources that haunts me during the battle. Some Romans tried to surrender individually, breaking ranks and walking toward the Parthian lines with their hands raised. The Parthians shot them anyway, not out of cruelty necessarily, but because in Parthian culture, surrender in the middle of battle isn't recognized the same way it is for Romans. You surrender after the battle ends, not during. But the Romans didn't know that. They died confused, thinking they were following the rules of war, not realizing the rules had changed. That's the core horror of Carrhae. The Romans died fighting an enemy they didn't understand, using tactics that didn't work, in terrain that negated every advantage they'd spent 2 centuries perfecting. They did everything their training told them to do. They held formation, they kept discipline, they trusted the system. And the system killed them because it was the wrong system for the wrong place. Shurinna, the Parthian general, doesn't survive his victory long. Within a year, the Parthian king has him executed. The king fears Shurinna's popularity and military genius, so the man who engineered Rome's worst defeat in a century gets murdered by his own ruler. That's the other side of military glory. It makes you dangerous to the people you serve. Shurinna saves his empire and dies for it. The Roman prisoners who survive the march to Central Asia spend the rest of their lives in a place so far from Rome, they might as well be on another planet. Some of them marry local women. Some die of disease or despair. A few adapt. There's a theory debated, but tantalizing. The deeper you dig into Carrhae, the more it looks like a collision between 2 different philosophies of war. Rome believes war is about control. Control the ground, control the formation, control the enemy's movement. Parthia believes war is about space. Stay mobile, stay out of reach, control the distance. Rome wants to close and crush. Parthia wants to circle and bleed. In the desert, with no terrain to anchor the Roman line, the Parthian philosophy wins so decisively it looks like a massacre, and it is a massacre. But it's not a mindless one. It's a methodical application of a tactical system the Parthians have refined over centuries. They don't get lucky. They don't improvise. They execute a plan so perfectly that the Romans never have a chance. That's what makes Carrhae different from other disasters. It's not that Rome makes a catastrophic mistake, though Crassus makes plenty. It's that the Parthians don't make any. They control the engagement from start to finish, they dictate the range, they manage their ammunition, they bait the Roman cavalry into a trap, and they break the formation through patience rather than force. There's something almost modern about it. The Parthians don't try to outfight Rome, they outsystem them. They recognize that the legion's greatest strength, its discipline and cohesion, becomes a weakness when you can attack from range with unlimited ammunition. The legionaries can't break formation or they die individually. But staying in formation just makes them a denser target. It's a strategic checkmate. After Carrhae, Roman military writers spend decades analyzing what went wrong. They write manuals on fighting horse archers. They train new units specifically designed for Eastern warfare. But they never really solve the problem, because the problem isn't tactical, it's geographical. Rome's military system is optimized for the Mediterranean world mountains, forests, rivers, coastlines. Take that system into the vast, flat interior of Asia and it breaks. Carrhae isn't an anomaly, it's a preview. Every time Rome tries to push deep into Parthian territory, they face the same challenge. How do you fight an enemy that won't stand still? The answer, historically, is that you don't. You negotiate. You build buffer states. You accept that some places aren't worth conquering. But Rome doesn't learn that lesson for another 3 centuries. They keep trying, they keep losing, and every failure traces back to the same tactical dead end that killed Crassus's army in the desert. The Roman legions are an incredible military innovation. They're arguably the most effective fighting force in the ancient world. But effectiveness is contextual. Take the same soldiers, the same discipline, the same courage, and put them in a place where none of those advantages matter. And suddenly, they're just 50,000 men standing in the sun waiting to die. That's not a failure of courage. It's a failure of adaptation. And adaptation requires humility, the willingness to admit that what worked before might not work now, that the enemy might understand something you don't, that winning requires changing the plan. Crassus doesn't have that humility. He's too rich, too successful, too convinced of his own brilliance. So he marches into the desert with 7 legions and leaves with ghosts. The Parthians return to their capital and celebrate one of the greatest victories in their history. They stage a play mocking Crassus's death. They parade the captured Roman standards through the streets. The standards are sacred to Rome. Each legion's eagle is supposed to be defended to the death. Losing them is a dishonor that takes decades to erase. Rome will spend the next 30 years negotiating and scheming and occasionally fighting to get those eagles back. Some are recovered. Some disappear into Parthian temples and stay there. But for the Parthians, Carrhae is more than a victory. It's proof that Rome isn't inevitable, that the empire has limits, that someone finally figured out how to beat the legions decisively. It shifts the balance of power in the East for generations. It means Rome will never control the Silk Road trade routes. It means the Parthians remain the only major power Rome can't defeat outright. And it means that in the long catalog of Roman expansion, there's a permanent asterisk everywhere except Parthia. The 20,000 Romans who survive and make it back west carry the story with them. They tell it in taverns and camps and Senate hearings. They explain what it feels like to stand in formation while arrows fall like hail. They describe the sound of the drums. They talk about watching Publius's head on the spear. The story spreads. It becomes legend. And legends have weight. For the next century, Roman soldiers marching east know about Carrhae. They know what happened. They know what the desert can do. And some of them, standing on the banks of the Euphrates before crossing into Parthian territory, must have wondered if this time would be different, if this general was smarter, if this army was better, or if they were just walking into another desert to die in the heat under another sky full of arrows. Most wars are remembered for the heroism, the sacrifices, the turning points, where courage changed history. Carrhae is remembered for the opposite, a moment where courage wasn't enough, where the bravest men in the ancient world died because their general didn't understand the ground beneath his feet. The Roman Republic will survive another 20 years after Carrhae, but it's wounded. The loss of Crassus removes the buffer between Caesar and Pompey. The civil war that follows destroys the political system. Augustus builds the empire on the ruins, and when future emperors look east toward Parthia, they remember what happened to Crassus. Some try to avenge him, most fail. A few succeed temporarily, but Rome never fully conquers Parthia. That desert line holds. The battlefield at Carrhae today is empty scrubland in southeastern Turkey, near the Syrian border. There are no monuments, no markers. The sand has buried the arrowheads and the bones. But the story survives because it teaches something essential, that systems can fail, that what worked yesterday might kill you tomorrow, and that the deadliest enemy isn't the one with the biggest army. It's the one who understands the terrain better than you do. If you've made it this far, you're someone who values the uncomfortable truths hiding in history. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more forgotten stories to uncover together. Thanks for watching.